Welcome to the nextTalk podcast. We are a nonprofit passionate about keeping kids safe online. We're learning together how to navigate tech, culture, and faith with our kids. Today we have Kristen Jenson with us. She is a best-selling author. Kristen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mandy. It's so good to be back here with you.
You're not a stranger. We have known each other, almost 8 to 10 years. We met at a conference. We were both really new to this line of work back then. And it's been really cool to see your books be such a resource for parents. I mean, I know when I found them, they were so fantastic. You're the author of Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And everybody who's listening is like, oh, this is the lady that Mandy's always talking about. But I want you to take us back to why you wrote it, the backstory of what led you to write this book.
Yes, well, it was not in my plans, not a life goal, but I met a mom of a large family, very faithful, and it turns out her 17-year-old son was molesting his younger brothers and sisters, from the 14-year-old down to the 4-year-old. And it really had some very negative consequences, not only for him, but for the family. And pornography was definitely involved in promoting that behavior. And so I talked to her late into the night, like 1:30 in the morning, and I just couldn't get this thought out of my mind that young children needed to be warned about this problem of pornography and what it can do to their minds. I went and looked. I thought, I'll just go online or on Amazon, whatever. I'll find a book and I'll get it for her. And I couldn't find anything. And I thought, this is ridiculous. There has to be a book. There has to be a read aloud book that you can, there was all these books about body safety, right? I thought there's got to be a mind safety book, for digital dangers. But I couldn't find it. So I started doing some research and started educating myself. I mean, I already knew that pornography could be an addiction, but I didn't know that children were being impacted at the rate and at the seriousness that they were being impacted. So yeah, that was the beginning of writing Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. I had a lot of help from a lot of other really smart people. And that came out in 2014. And then parents came to me and said, what about a book for younger children? And that was I remember the first mom that asked me that after a presentation. And she's like, what about for 3-year-olds? And I'm like, what? And then I looked around and so many 3-year-olds are on tablets and iPads. And so we wrote Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior for 3 to 7. And then the original Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, Porn Proofing Today's Young Kids is for 7-ish to 11-ish. It really depends on the child. I know parents that use it as even as a guideline for teens, although there's a lot more that teens need to know. But just to begin conversations about the brain, about addiction, and about some of the harms of pornography. So I'm so very grateful that I could provide a resource for parents in that way.
Well, and what is so cool is I think I found you around 2014 or 15, because my kid had been exposed to pornography through a conversation. No phones were present. And my thought was, I'm never giving her a phone, so I'm not going to have to worry about pornography. But then she got exposed to this graphic nature, this image in her mind that had been painted to her through a conversation, no screens present. And that was my moment where I was like, whether I get my kid a phone or not, I have to talk to her about pornography. And that's when I started searching online for books, and I found yours. Didn't know you back then. And then I started using it in my home. It was a huge help for me, just having that initial conversation of what do I even say in the beginning. And it got the dialogue happening. And so then I got to meet you and have you on the podcast, and it's just been a joy. And then Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior. I mean, you asked me to review this before it came out, and I have a signed copy from the Miss Kristen Jenson on this one.
I think you're listed in the back of the book, too.
Oh,
I think you are.
That's so funny. Your resources, I think I knew how they helped me. And that's why I kept recommending them, because I thought this is going to be. And now my kids are 17 and 21, and I look back and I'm so thankful for the foundation that you helped me set in my home to talk to my kids about pornography. And of course, the conversation shifted in middle school and high school, and I had to get more into the why behind the harmful effects of pornography, which I want to talk about today. But these were just instrumental, and I just want to say thank you for the work that you have done.
I appreciate everything that you've done, not only for your own children, but for your audience. And we need about 10,000 more Mandys out there.
Same.
And so it's great because I know you're inspiring so many, not only helping, but inspiring so many other parents to do this good work that you're involved in.
Well, it takes courage, and you're so afraid that you're going to say the wrong thing. And I think that's where your books really helped me, because I didn't want to overexpose my kids, but I knew I had to, what you say, I'm going to quote you, porn proof them. I knew I had to do that, whether they were going to have a phone or not. And so that's really where your work really helped me engage in that conversation about this specific topic. So parents of littles, 3 and up, I want you to go get these books and start implementing them today. Kristen, I know sometimes you get some backlash. Do 3-year-olds really need it? Can you speak into that?
Well, like I said, it was a parent that came to me, and it was not just one, there were several. They came to me and said, we need one for younger children. And I'm like, okay, all right. Back then I didn't have grandchildren that were this age. Now I do. The problem is there's so much access to pornography for even little children, getting on phones, getting on iPads, and you think, oh, you've locked it down, and there's a way. They find a way, or they go to a friend's house and get exposed. So I was asked to speak at an early childhood education conference a couple of years ago to talk about the junior book. And also we have a wonderful play guide that goes with it that's free to download. So when you get the book, look at the QR code, download that free guide. It'll help you really improve upon and make the book even more impactful with your children. So anyway, I was going there to present this and kind of launch it and speak about it. And before my second class, a woman came in and she said, and she was a teacher, and she said, when I first saw that you were listed on this program, I was in shock. Why would we need your stuff at a early childhood ed conference? But she said, then I had this experience, and it was someone close to her, 3-year-old girl who got into, obviously she had access to some kind of a device, and she had seen, our kids imitate. They imitate. They're wired to imitate. And so she had seen, I'm sure her mom recording things and making videos and all this stuff. So she used the device to make a video of her taking her clothes off. And so they're really worried when they saw this video. They're like, oh my gosh, she's being groomed. And they started looking into this. And then they found a video of her trying to have sex with the family pet. This was not a grooming. They could never find a hands-on perpetrator. What they found was porn. Porn was the perpetrator. And she had obviously been watching bestiality. So this is the thing. You can't control when your child is exposed to porn. I really hope it's not until they're way older. But you can't take that risk. They need to know. They need to have a heads up. They need to know exactly what to do when they see it. So even as young as 3. And then the other beautiful thing about starting at this age is that it's just normalized conversation, right? It's just something, that they are like, oh yeah, we talk about this. And it's just one of the dangers, just like body safety or, not crossing the street until you've looked both ways. All those kinds of skills that we're teaching children need to start early, and probably earlier than you think. That's why we have Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior, and it's become a #1 bestseller along with the original book. And it's just a beautiful, gentle way to begin these very protective conversations.
Well, and I know you wrote the books because you wanted the kids to know the red flags of what to look for. And I think for me, that was great to educate my kids on that. But for me as a parent, and I talk about this in my book, it helped me to work on my parent filter. It helped me not to go crazy parent mode when they did start communicating to me that they were exposed to things, because I was also learning how to have this conversation without a lot of emotion, and reaction.
Yep. Mandy, in the back of this book, there is a section, Notes to Parents and Caregivers, and we have a whole section on how to respond. And we say exactly that, right? So you may have a lot of mixed feelings, but put a smile on your face and just say, thank you for telling me. And we also have a guide called the SMART Plan. My kids saw porn, now what? I'm just looking at the title over here. And it's a SMART plan. And the first step, S, is stay calm. So if you find that your kids come and tell you and you're all freaked out, stay calm, go yell in your pillow, go talk to a friend or a spouse, work through your own emotions before you vomit them on your kid, right? Just like, not to be graphic, but that's true. Kind of what we can do. Now, even if you do that, there are ways to kind of like repair some of that, of course, but so much better if you can stay calm. And I'm not a calm person, to be honest. I have anxiety issues. So I can see why people are like, freak out. But it's so important to stay calm and then make a plan. And, there's some steps that we have in this guide that you can get on Defend Young Minds to just help you walk through. Be prepared for what is going to happen. If you've done it right, your kids will come and tell you and talk to you. If they never come and talk to you, it's because they don't feel comfortable maybe, or they're just, I'm not saying you're a bad parent if they don't come and talk to you. I'm just saying that it's good if they come and talk to you, because then you can help them work through this.
Well, we always say it doesn't feel like it's a win, but it is a win when they confide in you. And I think just what you're speaking into, if they don't talk to you about anything, they're not reporting things to you. It's a red flag should go off in the parent's brain that we need to do some work here on our relationship so that they feel safe with me. And we've all been there. I've had to do that as well. I also wanted to say, I have had the overreaction, crazy parent mode response. And one thing that I have learned really well is if I say to my kid, I'm so sorry that I had that response. I was mad that you're growing up in a world that's on your app. It shouldn't be. And I'm mad about that. And I'm still going to be mad about that. But I need you to know something, I'm not mad at you. You did all the right things. You saw something on your screen and you were like, oh, this is naked people on a screen. This is something I need to tell mom about. And you told me. And so I'm not mad at you. You did all the right things. But I am mad that you live in a world that this is happening, Right. And so making that distinction for them so they know why you had an overreaction, it almost helps repair the relationship. And then maybe, I've seen in my own kid, it kind of gets them frustrated with the world that they're growing up in, that they have access to that kind of stuff.
Well, porn is the enemy, not your kid, right? Okay. Porn is the enemy. So just keep that in mind, even though sometimes you're just like, what? I think that's so true. And also, sometimes when we make mistakes and we go and we work to repair them, that's actually a good, not that you want to make a mistake on purpose, but that's actually good modeling for your child when they become a parent. They see that you are willing to apologize. You are willing to say, you know what, can we do that over, a do-over, right? Can we do that over because I really didn't mean to But again, you're going to have these feelings. You're going to have anger. You're going to maybe have shame or embarrassment. You're going to be disappointed. There's all these feelings that if you will deal with those first, then it'll work out so much better for your relationship and the trust, because kids will test the waters. They'll give you a little bit, and then if you don't freak out, then they'll give you a little bit more. They're testing you. So as you build that relationship, know that even the first little bit that they give you may not be the whole story, but they're testing.
Yeah. A lot of times too, I think kids will test with my friend did this or my friend saw this when they were actually the ones that did it or
They're the
saw
friend.
it to kind of see how you're going to react to it. And so
Right.
you just have to be careful about how you navigate that. No shaming, but just, oh, they're a kid that may not know or may not know how harmful it is. That kind of stuff, I think is really helpful. So we've got these books to talk with younger people. And I've noticed in my own home, again, I said this before, it was a launching pad to so many conversations through the years. And in fact, the good pictures, bad pictures, the one for the elementary age, six and up, that one, I want you to explain to me the emotional, I think it's the thinking brain and the feeling brain. That, Kristen, yes, it's helped with pornography, but you know what else it's helped with? Teen attitude, dating. When they start feeling all the things, and I'm like, you're thinking with your feeling brain right now, let's move it to the thinking brain. That has been a launching pad to not only talk about porn, but so many other topics, drugs, trying alcohol, like everything, because it may feel right, it may feel good, but logically, is this the right thing to do right now? So just summarize that just briefly, what I'm talking about here, thinking brain and feeling brain, and how you walk kids through how to maneuver that in good pictures, bad pictures, the elementary version.
Yeah. So kids love to learn about their brain. And when we say you have two brains, they're like, what? And so we do have these two major sections. Now, this is very simplified, but what kids need to know is they have a very primitive feeling brain. And that brain, you could also call it the wanting brain, right? It's the brain that is definitely trying to keep you alive, right? And it's helping you with all kinds of feelings of hunger, thirst, drives, right? And even your sexual drives, right? So all of this, we don't really say that outright in the book, but all of these drives that help to keep you alive. Now, your thinking brain is really what makes us human. It's that prefrontal cortex where we learn our values, we learn from our past mistakes, we learn to think of things like logically. So how is that going? Like, we learn to think about consequences, right? And we learn right from wrong. So if, in the book, we say after we explain the two brains, we ask the question, like, which of these brains should be making your important decisions, right? And it's the thinking brain. The thing about this is that addiction of any kind, it puts the thinking brain in the driver's seat. Now the feeling brain is making all the decisions, and you're bypassing that thinking brain. And you know what happens when you bypass the thinking brain? It shrinks. And they've tested this on MRIs. And they've shown that anyone that's an addict to anything, whether it's substance or behavioral, they have a shrinkage in their prefrontal cortex, in the gray matter. It's well proven. So it's so important that we addiction proof our kids, because this world is awash in addiction, whether it's screens, gambling, porn, substances, fentanyl, whatever. We need to teach our kids how to addiction proof their brain. And originally I was just going to write a book about addiction, right? But a good friend of mine convinced me, no, the porn thing, that's where kids can get into an addiction easier, right? They're not going to the corner store buying cigarettes and alcohol. We're not going to let them do that. But they can get on and see porn, unfortunately, and we have not yet shut that down. So Yes, the so important for them to understand in very simple ways, and it's super powerful. Like you said, which brain is in charge right now? And let's move that from that feeling brain to the thinking brain. In the books, we give kids a definition, a warning, and a plan. And part of that plan is taking it from the feeling brain into the thinking brain. That's a very important. So it's all like based on science and how the brain works. But if you can take that initial, like whether it's arousal, curiosity, or whatever, and then put it into the thinking brain and think about it and what you should do. And one of those steps is labeling it. That's pornography, right? And so important for kids to understand their brains and
I love
have
the
that
science behind
defense.
it, and like I said, it started out as a way to talk to my kids about porn, but it has translated into so many other things as they've gotten older. And we've talked about screen addiction, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, all of it. It goes back to that feeling brain, thinking brain that you outlined in this book. I also want to say it's a science based, non faith book. So, I mean, honestly, I feel like it should be in every elementary school library in America. Like that's what I've been advocating for in Texas. Get these books in our school libraries. You know, it's so good to start that foundation. But I also want to talk about, like, how does pornography impact our mental health, our well-being? Because I know these kinds of conversations have been very important as my kids have gotten older, to explain that why behind it. You know, they have the plan, they know thinking to feeling and all of that. But as a lot of their peers are watching it and getting educated by it, and they may feel left out because they're talking about it all the time, reinforcing the why. Honey, there's so many harmful effects of pornography. And so, can we talk about that for a little bit here?
Yeah, yeah. Well, early on, I would hear stories about people committing suicide because they could not stop and they hated themselves and it was ruining their marriage and whatever, or they were divorced. And I thought, oh, that's terrible. But like, where's the science? Like, where are the studies? Well, now we have so many studies that are linking pornography use with poor mental health outcomes. And in fact, I was just not too long ago at a conference and gave a presentation on the mental health disorders and pornography, a review of that research. And it's all over the world. These studies come from all over the world. It's not just the United States. It's Europe. It's China. It's, Australia. They're all over the world. Early intentional exposure to porn is associated with depression among youth. This was a longitudinal study out of China. There's more suicide ideation and suicide attempts for frequent users. This was a study of kids ages 12 to 18 who were using porn, internet porn, and it was in Korea. More kids are lonely. More people are lonely, report being lonely as they use pornography more, which is so true for all addictions. You may start drinking with your friends, or doing drugs with your friends. You're going to end up alone. It doesn't last long with friends. It is something that will make you lonely. All addictions will. Porn is no exception. More depression, less self-worth is another study. This was done in the United States with college students. Porn users experience more negative mental and physical health even. That was a study done, I think, in the U.S. I believe that was in the Seattle area. Users with problematic porn use scored significantly higher in obsessive compulsive behavior, depression, anxiety, hostility, phobic anxiety, and paranoid ideation. As you go through all of these, and these are just a sampling, right? Studies, you see the impact on mental health. And when you talk to people who have struggled to get out, I was just talking with a mom. She goes, yeah, I got into porn. And she goes, in the moment, you think it's going to distract you from, and that's another thing these studies show, is that kids use it for a distraction. Like they're having a negative emotion and they know if they go and use porn and do the things associated with it, that they'll be able to forget for a time their problems. But then after they use it, she said, I just felt like terrible, just horrible. I hear a lot of people telling me this, and then I see the research. So if we want our children to have good, positive mental health and to be successful and have successful relationships, we need to have these conversations, honest conversations. We're not trying to scare them to death, but like they need to know, they need to know what this can lead to. And just like anything, like my own dad was an alcoholic and it did not end well. And I know others that the first drink, that's it, right? So there's always a spectrum of how quickly people can like get into this and how quickly they can get out of it. But it definitely is associated with poor mental health outcomes that we want our kids to have good mental health, and porn is not going to help them in that regard.
It's not a positive thing for their life. I mean, yeah, and their brains just aren't fully capable. Like they're getting educated about sex through porn, which is often what we're watching on a screen is often rape or trauma or sexual abuse, right? I mean, we have studies on that, right? Showing
Yeah.
what we're
Yeah.
actually watching, trafficked victims
Right.
on pornography.
Absolutely. So they're getting a very toxic view of sex. And when they've done studies and reports, I'm thinking of a report done in the UK where kids were like, I don't even want it. If my parents are doing it like that, like, I don't ever want to have sex. Like some people are just like turned off because they don't want the violence in porn. And the reason it's become so violent. One of the reasons is because when you put sex and violence together, you get a bigger like rush of brain chemicals. And so it feeds into addiction. You're always chasing the high. You can't get it with the same old vanilla porn. So now it's got to become this or more like, people get fetishes with certain kinds of porn. They spend hours and hours and hours looking just for that right clip that will arouse them. And it becomes such a time waster. So there's another thing. I mean, it's toxic. There are things they do in porn, very common things I will never, ever say on a podcast. Not only that, but like as far as cognitive development, the time that they waste, it sucks them in. The time that they waste on porn, the time that they waste on screens even, is getting in the way of them developing normally and naturally. And so again, we need to warn kids about this so they have the facts. Mandy, they're not going to be happy when they get older if they haven't been warned and they've been pulled in. I've heard of many kids complaining that their parents never talked to them. So we need to do them a favor.
Well, and I think one thing too is just, I would just on a real practical thing say to my kids, look, when you see that on a screen, you're going to go to school tomorrow and you're going to see people differently. And I don't want that for you. I don't want that. You're going to be thinking about what's under that mini skirt or what's under those pair of shorts instead of like seeing the person, and that does something to your developing brain. Like just making them aware that it makes you see the world differently. When you go to bed at night and close your eyes, you're going to see different things. We talked a lot about the mental health stuff. But also, and you and I have talked about this because I know when I first started seeing this at nextTalk, I mean, I remember talking to you about this specifically at a conference. I pulled you aside and I said, is this, like, I'm seeing a lot of this. Are you seeing this? And it was the child-on-child sexual abuse stuff. Because back then, when we were starting to see it early on, we didn't have a ton of research to back it up. But it was like, so many families were coming out of the woodwork after my event saying, I have an older boy or an older cousin with a younger boy, and pornography is always involved here.
Always.
And so that's even another level of how it's affecting their mental health. They're literally experiencing trauma from sexual abuse that will take years to recover from.
Really quickly, we started hearing about this 9, 10 years ago, and seeing that again, porn was a perpetrator. Porn was causing kids to uh, perpetrate on other kids, even if they had never had a hands-on abuser. I was at a child abuse conference this last year. But one thing that was interesting is that it used to be 40%. So we'd always quote this like 40% of child abuse is done by other children, minors, right? Child on child. Now it's 70%. 70%. So in 10 years, it's gone up to 70%. What is driving that? Really, is there that many more perpetrators that are hands-on? I believe a big part of it is pornography is the perpetrator. They're learning, and kids are wired to imitate. That's how they learn. We all know it as parents. We see our kids imitate us, and it can be funny. It can also be terrifying, but they do. If they see this, it's just not a stretch to think that they can then go and perpetrate on another child. And in their mind, it's just another form of play, but it's a very harmful form of play. I was on a plane going to a conference years ago about this problem, child on child, right? And sitting next to me was a guy who was a pilot, a private pilot, and he was going to his next job. And he asked me what I was doing, and well, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm going. It's kind of heavy. And his face just fell. And he's probably like in his late 30s. And he just said to me, he goes, that happened to me. That happened to me when I was a kid. He says, I'm still not over it. Honestly, it can go for a lifetime. So it's not just protecting your own children from sexual abuse. And there is really, actually, I have so many stories, and again, maybe this is another podcast, but so many stories of children who their parents have read the book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, to them, and it has saved them from a hands-on abuser because they recognized and reported the number one grooming tool, which is pornography. And I've got lots of stories about that where kids have just, they went and reported, and then they got away from a potential a perpetrator, a child predator. But it will help your child not to become, again, it's a victim. That child is also a victim. The perpetrators that are children, they're also victims of pornography. And I'll tell you, if you get in this situation, I don't want to be scaring you, but I'm telling you, I've looked into this and we've written up about it on Defend Young Minds. If you get into this situation, it depends on the laws in your state. And it is something you really want to avoid at all costs. Don't think that your child could never have this happen to them. Prepare them. Talk to them. So you don't look at porn. You want to be safe from predators, but you also don't want to be someone acting out like this on another child ever.
We don't want to raise a predator. We don't want to raise a predator. And I know they're victims too if they're kids, but
Yes.
but we have to be careful about that. And it's so important too that if it does happen in your home or your family, that steps are taken to report it, because the victim child needs to see that something is done too, and then it's not right, and then you get into the different state laws there.
Yeah. So we have some really good articles about this on Defend Young Minds. If you feel in your heart, you should just check it out, maybe for a friend. Honestly, before you would report it or do anything, like read up, give yourself a few days to read up, because there are some things that you should be doing to help your own child and the child that was hurt. Both of them need help. Both of them need counseling. And there are some really good programs out there for kids that have offended on other children. And so you can learn about them at Defend Young Minds.
Okay, great. You have all these research articles. Everything that we've talked about is at Defend Young Minds. That's your website. I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing. Do you have any other new upcoming projects that we need to be looking out for?
Yes. So I am writing a book for girls. So good pictures, bad pictures for girls, because as you know, more and more girls are getting into it, and they get into it in slightly different ways. And there's a lot of body image issues with it, which can lead to, all kinds of other problems. And so we want to talk to them about objectification. We want to talk to them about some of the harms of pornography that's in books, right? So pornography is not just pictures in a book, a video. It's pictures that can be created in your mind through what you're reading. And that's just as harmful and addicting as the visual videos that often boys start with, but girls will often end up there. Whether it's videos, whether it's anime porn, which is called hentai. You just want to make sure your girls, because we have kind of been ignoring girls. Oh, they're girls. They're not going to be interested in this. It's a boy problem. It's not a boy problem. It's not a girl problem. It's a human problem. And so I'm writing a good pictures, bad pictures for girls. I'm also preparing to pull together one for teens, like a conversations for teens, because we just get asked so much, how can I take this information from good pictures, bad pictures and pump it up, right? And make it relevant for teens. So we're working on that. So lots of good things coming out. So I will put in a shameless pitch to subscribe to Defend Young Minds and get our weekly newsletter. And you will be hearing all about these new projects coming out.
Well, Kristen, thanks for being here and taking time out of your busy schedule to come back on our show. And just thank you for all the work you continue to do. I'm very excited for your new projects coming out.
Thank you, Mandy.
nextTalk is a 501c3 nonprofit keeping kids safe online. To support our work, make a donation at nexttalk.org. nextTalk resources are not intended to replace the advice of a trained healthcare or legal professional, or to diagnose, treat, or otherwise render expert advice regarding any type of medical, psychological, legal, financial, or other problem. You are advised to consult a qualified expert for your personal treatment plan.
Our nextTalk podcast is in the top 2% of over 3.4 million podcasts ranked by Listen Notes. But now we're also adding YouTube. So this is a whole new thing we're doing. If you could